Well, have you ever been shocked? Here's an individual who got a shock. They left a comment under one of my videos and said, imagine the shock I got when I tested to check how the little diet orange drink affected my ketones. Shock, horror. I raced back and took a look at the bottle. It turned out it was full sugar. So they thought they were drinking a diet orange drink. It turned out it was a regular orange drink, loaded, laced, stuffed, steeped with sugar. And then they checked their blood sugar, apparently their ketones even, and realized I really messed myself up. So as to the question of diet sodas, people will argue and debate and suggest that they are not natural, which, well, really, there's not much debate about that, but that they are unhealthy, and that may well be. I don't drink a lot of them, but I will confess, true confessions, I do drink them occasionally. And they do not do much to blood sugar. In fact, I think Benedict and I did a test of some diet sodas, and it turned out that blood sugar was lower for me, if I remember correctly, after about 40 minutes, an hour after drinking it than it was to start with. So they're not going to jack up your blood sugar. But here's a problem for people. Number one, this guy thought he was drinking a diet soda. It turns out he wasn't. Here's another issue that can come up. You may go to McDonald's drive-thru and order a Diet Coke. And a lot of those people that work at McDonald's, they're 16, 17-year-old kids that aren't real thorough and efficient and conscientious. Not all of them. I'm sure they have their great employees as well. But they may just hear you say something about Diet Coke and they didn't hear the diet part. Or maybe they did hear the whole thing and they ended up giving you a regular one anyway just because their mind was on their girlfriend or whatever. So I am always nervous when I order a diet soda where I can't go to the machine myself and make sure it's a true diet soda. Makes me nervous. I would guess, this is just my own Dennis Pollock guess, I would guess that with most fast food places where they fix it for you and you don't get to see if they go to the right place to get a true diet soda, that probably 10 to 20% of the sodas you get back are regular. They either don't hear you or they're not paying attention or whatever. So there's always a danger when you order a diet soda and you can't do it yourself. Now, if you go to the machine and it's got all the different sodas and you put your cup against the diet, then you can make sure for yourself. And yeah, I do know that they're probably not the healthiest thing. There's a lot of things that aren't the healthiest thing, but to have them occasionally is probably not going to be that big of a deal. That's my take. You decide that for yourself. But yeah, he got a shock, and I've always worried about that sort of a thing. Okay, here is someone who says, I have discovered that no matter how I keep my blood sugar and A1C regulated, I will always have a broken endocrine system, as evidenced by stepping even slightly off the low-carb diet even one time. Blood sugars jump immediately, reminding me I'm not cured, puts that word in quotes, I'm not, quote, cured, unquote, but I am controlled. You can beat diabetes, but you'll always be diabetic. Well, that may or may not be true, that last statement, you'll always be diabetic. People debate about that. But I will say this, the idea that I'm doing low carb and I'm just having maybe 20 grams of carbs per day, and then one day I decide to do a high carb meal and suddenly my blood sugar jumps way up, that's not really much proof of anything, because it is a well-known fact that when you do very low carb, and then you suddenly jump to a high-carb meal or a high-carb drink, your body's not prepared for that. Your body has been used to the idea of low carb. Your body has a memory. It's not just your mind that has a memory. Your body has a memory. And if you've been doing low-carb meal after meal after meal after meal, your body expects low carb. And if you shock it with a high-carb meal or a regular soda, or a bunch of chips and a big old sandwich made with a couple of large slices of white bread, Your body can't handle it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, well, I'm just as insulin resistant as I ever was. It means your body is in the rhythm of low carb. It's not going to put out much insulin because it's just used to not needing, your pancreas is used to the idea that it doesn't need to work very hard. And you shock it by doing something totally different than you normally do, you will probably jump up. And that's one reason. I remember seeing a video where somebody did an experiment. It's like, well, I'm going to eat really low carb. And then they reported, well, it worked for him. But when he went back to a normal diet, it showed that he was more insulin resistant than ever. No, it didn't show that at all, most likely. What it showed was his body was in the rhythm of eating low carb. And when he went to a high carb meal, the first day or two, the memory in his body and in his pancreas and in his metabolic system that he's going to be getting low carbs, it just wasn't ready to ramp up and start putting out the insulin like it would if he was eating high carb. And that's one reason why many people will suggest that if you're going to take one of those controlled glucose tests where they give you the sweet drink and they're going to see how high your blood sugar goes up, you better take a few days and eat a higher carb diet. Because if you go straight from a low-carb diet and then you take one of those glucose control tests where they give you the sweet drink, your body's not going to be ready for that. And someone's going to tell you, well, boy, you are very insulin resistant. You may say you're doing keto, but it's not doing you much good. Well, it may be doing you a lot of good. So again, he says, well, I'll always be diabetic. That's debatable. I have had people tell me that they can get by with more than they used to could. But again, if you're going straight from months of low carb to no carb, and then you suddenly have a dinner with macaroni and cheese and a big slice of bread, and then you have a sweet sugary dessert, and your blood sugar just jumps off the charts, well, don't be so surprised. And it doesn't really prove too much one way or the other. Now, if you switch over and you go to a couple of weeks of eating high carb, and then you still find yourself with the numbers way up, then yeah, maybe you haven't made so much progress. Personally, I don't have any intention of eating high carb meals, period, ever. Now, maybe if I took one of those glucose control tests, I might do it for a few days, but I don't really even plan on it. As long as my A1C is good, as long as my fasting glucose is good, as long as my random glucose tests are good and my spikes aren't really spikes, they're just gentle rises, I just don't see any reason for that. So don't ever plan to do that. But again, he says, well, I go off the rail and it goes way up. Doesn't prove really much of anything doing it that way. I want you to know that I have another YouTube channel. It's called by my name, Dennis Pollock. And on this channel, my wife, Benedicta, and I teach the basics of the Bible in a simple, user-friendly fashion. Normally, on Mondays, I post what I call a video devo, in which I take various Bible topics and share scriptures to help you understand the subject a little better. On Thursdays, I post Bible studies by Benedicta and me as we sit at our dining room table and discuss various portions of the scriptures. We cover book studies and Bible character studies. So catch me on Mondays sharing devotional talks, and Benedicta and me on Thursdays as we study the greatest book in the world, the Bible. Check in the description to find a link to our Bible teaching channel, which is called by my name, Dennis Pollock.